before I was at Packet, I was actually at Flextronics working on the Open19 development from the beginning. So I had the pleasure and the opportunity to transition from being a supplier of the technology to a consumer. And today, I'm going to tell you a story about a day, well, 3 days, when I really, really wish I was consuming the Open19 technology. So you've heard a lot today about the difference between edge versus cloud, and I don't want to go too far into the weeds of that, but one of the products that I'm responsible for at Packet is developing the edge cloud product. And one of the things we decided to do was to Paul's point earlier, we wanted to get something out there to get started. There was a lot of talk about what the edge could be, how great it can be, and we can continue to start spinning our wheels about the next gen technology. We decided to make a few key choices and get something out there to go start kicking the tires. Because there's more than just getting the right technology out to the place, it's getting the right operational model, it's getting the right partners, it's getting that end-to-end story put together in a pretty clear way for us to really understand how we're going to go optimize this and build it out. So if you look at it, it's pretty simple from our perspective. Core data centers have a bunch of servers in one location. The edge has many servers in many different locations. And the trick is to figure out how to effectively get a lot of servers closer to where the data is being generated in an efficient manner so that people can consume it. And Packet is focusing a lot of our efforts on making that very simple, easy, and repeatable so that we can make this an easier experience for our customers to consume it. So before I get started, I know a lot of people here are probably familiar with servers and the hardware that's built in the cloud. How many people have actually been to or built a normal data center? Raise your hands. So a handful of you. How many of you have built a true edge data center? I got one. And I'll question you on that one, Jason. We'll talk later. So if you look at a traditional data center, this is usually what you see. It's a giant, beautiful building, plenty of power, big, tall ceilings, huge shipyard for people to bring in servers, large racks. You can rack and roll an entire 52U rack of gear and plug it directly into the outlet without much of any issues. You're going to have a ton of people, a ton of support, a lot of ISPs there to give you network connectivity. There's going to be power providers. There's going to be redundant power. You're going to have just about every utility you could want and the expertise on hand to be able to support and install this. It actually makes it a very nice experience when you go deploy racks and racks of gear. This is what we faced. This was the first edge deployment out in Boston that we did. It was in the middle of winter, which was probably not the best time to go out there and do it. I think we woke up and it was about 12 degrees Fahrenheit on my phone when we got to the site at 7 a.m. That first picture on the left is literally the driveway to go deliver the servers. And you can see the truck dropping off the gear that we had delivered from the staging company out to the data center at the base of the tower. So there's no smart hands, there's no giant long hallways and easy places for you to rack and roll an entire system into a data center. You got snow, you got woods, you got poles in the ground that you have to avoid. It's a very unique experience. And I'll preface this before I go into some of the challenges that we faced, that we knew this going in. We had set the tone with our partners in these deployments that we're going to figure this out together. We're going to commit to each other that we're going to go make this happen because we picked the right products to get something out there. We've got the customers that are waiting to support us. We just need to go do it. So let's not harp and worry about the problems that we're going to face. Let's just tackle them one thing at a time. And at the end of this, we're going to have a pretty strong baseline and understanding of what it really takes to build out an edge data center. And as we go do this again and again in different types of locations, we'll get better and better at it. And as our hardware evolves, which we continue to invest in, the solutions will get easier, they'll get better, they'll get simpler to deploy. And that's kind of how we walked into this with an open mind. So the first one that we deployed was out in Boston, which is now live as Boss 2 in our API. And I wanted to give you some highlights from our partner with SBA and Base Layer. We put this out by the Gillette Stadium, and I'll show you a picture here real quick. This is the site that we were dealing with. You can see that it's very remote. There's not much stuff around it. It's pretty difficult to get to. But the serviceability in that area, you got the Gillette Stadium, you got parking lots. There's a lot of applications that can be used, which is why we selected this. It was also an opportunity for us to be close to a lot of the carriers that were currently deployed, which is another aspect of the edge strategy when selecting locations. So just going back, we ran into a few issues along the way, and rather than let you guys read them all off, I was going to show you a few pictures and help give you an understanding of what we dealt with. But power, network, fueling the generator, I'll explain that in a minute, and overall the fact that it's just 12 degrees in the middle of winter. So if you take a look at some of the things going on here, I'll walk through each of them in their time. We took out traditional OEM gear, probably about 30 servers, and had to rack and cable everything up. So I don't know if any of you have actually gone through the effort of racking and cabling an entire system from scratch without any pre-labeled cables, without any real printed out port configuration diagrams that you had to follow, making sure you had the right revision, that you're hitting the right ports with the right server. It's complicated. There's a lot of opportunities for errors, mistakes, stuff just is going to happen. So we took a very slow, pragmatic, efficient approach to make sure we did it right. One of the first things we ran into when we got to the site is we quickly realized there wasn't any power. And this wasn't the fault of any of our partners. During that time, there was a ton of storms going on, and the law actually dictated that the utility providers would have to support breaks and fixes rather than bringing on new power lines and stuff. So when we put the flag in the ground to say we're going to come out on this date and deploy this, we thought there was enough time to give the utility provider the sufficient schedule to get it done, but it just wasn't the case. So we're sitting there in the very first edge site, and we had no power, and we thought we were dead in the water. But we had this determination that we were going to get it done, right? So we worked with our partners. They were able to get us a generator on site so that we could at least get some light and take a look at what we have to cable up when we start putting this thing out. So we start to unrack and unbox all the servers. We get them into the container, and we're starting to mechanically look at the system, make sure the PDUs are right. We find a few challenges with the power inputs and the PDUs that were actually on site. We had to make a few rack design changes on the fly. It was all small things that we could handle and address. So we started to systematically go through the rack and stack process. And I'll get to the numbers later at the end, but it takes some time to get this stuff in when you're wearing 2 layers of clothes, pair of gloves. It's not easy. We get to the power side of the things, and we had a choice to make at the end of it was, okay, we've got this thing cabled up. It took us, I think, a total of 12 and a half hours to get everything racked and stacked and cabled in 12-degree Fahrenheit weather. And the generator was starting to run out of fuel. So we had a choice to try and power on the servers that day or wait till the next morning to figure out how we might be able to do it better. And we had a phone call with our SVP of product sitting in the audience, and we had to make a decision. Do we plug in this 9-kilowatt generator directly into the rack and try and turn on the servers so that we can check the box and say it turned on and it's live? Or do we wait till the next morning and get a bigger generator and plug it directly into the container so that the UPS would take the hit and we don't run the risk of frying all the gear that we just spent 12 and a half hours putting into this site? So we made the more responsible decision and brought in a bigger generator the next morning and got that plugged in. So before we left the site the day before, we had everything cabled up, we had everything provisioned and ready to go. All the PDUs were switched to the on switch, ready to go, just waiting for that generator to come on. And we walked away feeling pretty confident. So the beauty was both of our partners had this commitment to the project, like we're going to get this done. The other beauty is for a baseline, that's a very, very easy hurdle for us to jump over the next time we go out to deploy this. So it was a success overall. And this is what it looks like today. Pretty clean, looks pretty, functions well, is deployable. We have customers on site running some applications. It's pretty exciting stuff. So that brings me to my next 2 deployments the following days out in Chicago. And these were slightly different. There was a bit more pre-planning ahead of this one. We had the power already driven to the site. The Vapor team had been working pretty closely with their utility providers for quite some time. And there were still some challenges, but I gotta say, and I'll say it again and again, the commitment that we had from our partners, regardless of the challenges, to get the job done was something that you don't find too often. And it's really important when you're trying to go do something new together, trying to figure out how to make this work. Having someone like that with you in the trenches is really what you need to get the things done. So if you're out there, I appreciate it. I probably don't say it enough. So if you look at this site, this is the Eden site. There's a lot going on here, but the tower in the middle, right below it to the left, there's a small facility. That's where the first chamber was going. Here's a top-down view of it. Again, it's not near as remote as the other one, but it's still complicated. You can't really back up a big truck and unload this. You can't just rack and roll an entire system into these sites. You got to be a bit more delicate with how you get your hardware into these locations. And you walk into the store and you see this giant chamber. I don't know if many of you have seen this in person, but this thing's pretty impressive. It's about 9 feet tall, 9 feet in diameter. It's a big hunk of metal. And we were able to, get everything pre-cabled this time. So we had a different experience with this installation because, our team had spent a lot of time prior to shipping the gear to the staging provider. We labeled the cables. We had everything ready to go. So unboxing it and getting everything laid out was a lot simpler than it was in Boston. And we still had some unique things to get around here. Given that this was the first deployment in a different type of rack than we were used to, Packet had to do a few design changes on the fly to get cables to fit around shelves, to get the switches to stack on top and reach the right servers. There's a bit of, let's just say, kludginess that we had to do to make sure that this would fit. But at the end of the day, we did what was necessary to get this thing plugged in and ready to go. The next site was out near Wrigley, and this was fun. So we had spent 2 days doing installs, and the one that we did in Edens took us about 10.5 hours from start to finish with a team of about 6 people. And keep in mind, a lot of us were kind of documenting the process and helping. It wasn't to be try and do this efficiently as possible for the clock. It was more to understand every piece along the way. But the second day, it was the same type of install, same type of deployment. We had already known all the issues that we were going to have to face from the previous deployment. And the Vapor guys got on their hands and knees and started working on this stuff hours before we showed up on site. We were able to cut the deployment time in half by the second day. And we were able to turn the site on within 6 hours. And here, let's see. There's more pictures of the site. Let me show you. And this is my point here. Look at all these cables we had to deal with. This is 80% of the time that we spent doing these configurations and these cablings was cabling up the switches, cabling up the power, trying to make sure everything fits around all the different pieces. It's a mess. And if you get one port wrong in the way it's set up, it's going to cause problems down the road. You got to send someone back out there to fix it. It's a nightmare. And until you actually go through it, I don't think you fully appreciate it. And one of the things that Open19 brings to the table is it solves this big problem. Here's a good picture of the actual chamber. Once it was installed, you can see how everything kind of plugs in the back. It's a pretty cool design. There's the team that did it together. I got to give a shout out to Jacques. He was the COO of Vapor. He was there through the entire time doing all this stuff. I had to be cautious on how I factored in my cost analysis when you're looking at putting in a COO's time for 13 hours on an install. So the numbers were a bit more pragmatic when we actually put it through. But if you want to take a look at it, and this is where I want to bring everything back to and why we're here and such a big supporter of Open19. Here's the 3 sites that we deployed. And on the right, you have the Open19 calculation. And I know it's a lot of numbers, so I'm just going to try and get down to the point here. You look at Boston, we spent pre-test and labeling, well, not so much on the labeling, 5 hours with 3 people. So 15 hours, man hours, getting stuff ready before it shipped out. On site, we spent 4 hours, or 4 technicians, 2 partner technicians, so 6 people. There was an hour of unpacking, about another hour of rack and stack, an hour and a half of labeling, 6 hours of cabling, and then about 3.5 hours of miscellaneous issues that were just some of the issues that we had to troubleshoot along the way. The total time from end to end was 12.5 hours. And keep in mind, that was the 12-degree Fahrenheit piece. So it was a rough day. The Chicago deployment, very similar. It was about an hour quicker. We were able to simplify a few things, but it was still 11.5 hours. You go to Chicago the second day, it was 6 hours, so we got better. I would say on a good day, if you're really efficient at getting this stuff out, you can go 5 to 6 hours. It's going to take an install because you have to cable everything up. If we were to do an Open19 deployment, and if you remember from some of the claims and videos that you've all had put together before, he was able to get a team to do it in less than an hour that had never seen the system before. And if you factor in the fact that we still got to do some unpackaging and some weird stuff that has to go to these weird sites, I rounded it to an hour and a half. The key takeaway here isn't necessarily that Open19 is going to bring you a cost savings, at least not from our perspective. It will, and we're working on that. Packet's investing in our own hardware to bring that down. But the big takeaway that I had from all of this is I did 3 edge sites in 3 days, the traditional way. If I had Open19, and when I have Open19, I'm going to be able to do 3 sites in 3 hours. And now I can go to many places, many locations in a very short amount of time. So as we look to expand and do 10, 12 more sites this year with the edge deployments to figure out the different venues, the different locations, the different challenges, the different partner models, I'm going to get better and faster at this. By the end of this, we should have a model with Open19 that can get us to 100 sites in a couple months. And it can only go up from there. So I want to leave this with you that Packet is investing in Open19. We are investing in automating the operational model for these edge deployments. And we're actually doing it. We actually have edge sites deployed. We're bringing customers, we're bringing partners, we're bringing software providers to the table. We're bringing the biggest cloud providers to the table. And we're building this. We're looking for people that want to be a part of this. We've got very strong partnerships with Vapor and others, and we want to build and invest in that more. So if anyone is interested in getting in the trenches with us and figuring this out and being a part of this new thing with us, come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we're going to have